Well, thank you, Carl. That was very nice of you. And thank you all for having me here today. Administrator Jackson wishes she could be here with you today, but we're tag teaming on our continuous work on the Gulf oil spill. I'm sure you've probably heard this from other people already, but we have over 100 EPA employees who are already involved with that, and I myself will be heading to Louisiana again tomorrow morning. It's a significant issue that we are spending a lot of time on, and I hope the outcome is going to be better than our worst fears. Many of you who were here last year had a chance to hear Administrator Jackson speak at this conference. Last year, this was her first major address after she was confirmed, and she remembers it fondly and was really happy to be here. Of course, this is before my time, but I know she assured you, and as Carl, I think, was just laying out, that EPA was on the job, and that I'm happy to have a chance to underscore that with you today. I'd like to begin also by thanking the sponsors that worked with everybody to organize this event. This is just a very important topic, a very important subject, and a very there's a lot of momentum around looking at how the economy and environmental work can work together. So it's good to see so many people from business and government, nonprofit leaders like Carl and others who've had the opportunity to go to look at how the economy and the environment work together hand in hand. Without a green economy, green jobs, our children won't have the healthy future that they deserve. And if we fail to continue the momentum that is building here, we're going to lose the race for cutting-edge science and clean technology. Our nation won't be as competitive on the world stage as it could be. So there's a significant amount at stake here, much more than just making sure that we reduce pollution, which is vitally important and obviously a main responsibility of the Environmental Protection Agency. But let me just say a couple of words also, slipping away from my official duties as the Deputy Administrator of EPA. And like many of you, I'm also a parent. And I have two daughters who are now in their 20s. And they're constantly haranguing me about composting and recycling in my own kitchen. I could tell you stories about carrying recycled materials back from the beach because they didn't have recycling there, but I'll just talk a little bit about the worm composter in my kitchen, which we lend worms to some of our neighbors so they could get theirs started. So in many ways, the generation today is, I like to think like the generation that I come from 40 years ago that was involved with the very first Earth Day. And that Earth Day 40 years ago was spurred by the tremendous amount of pollution and obvious environmental degradation that we were seeing every day. And 20 million, I know you know this story because it was just Earth Day a week or so ago, but 20 million Americans participated in those events that day in 1970, and it actually spurred on in that year the Clean Air Act and also the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency. So the agency that I now have stewardship responsibility for is intimately linked to that history of my own generation. But the children in this generation, as I said, they're recycling. They're trying to be energy efficient. They're going green and eating organic foods. They've changed the way we shop and eat and live. And I always like to say, well, I guess maybe we taught them pretty well. But whether they choose to admit that or not, they are also depending on us in my generation to continue to make progress on environmental protection and a green and clean economy that can protect the environment and create jobs at the same time. The new generation is really looking for us to solve both of these problems. We're coming off a very significant recession, but the green economy and green jobs are something that can really help boost both the economy and help with the pollution problems and environmental issues and resource issues that we have now in our society. They're looking forward to this. My younger daughter's in graduate school, and she's going to be anxiously looking for a job, and I'm hoping that she'll get one of these green jobs, and that other jobs in the prosperous future will come from more and more of a green economy and a clean energy future. So how do we begin? How do we get going on this? So I gave you a story about my own family a little bit here and the pressures that I get from my own children. But let me just say, some of this starts with environmental laws and regulations. The environmental laws and regulations that were enacted since the late 60s and really the early 70s really have had a profound effect on America, and they've had a profound effect on our economy, but not the way some people think. Because you often hear that there's this unfortunate trade-off, that we somehow are losing jobs every time we try to clean the economy. But I think the truth is not that we are losing jobs, but when implemented the right way, environmental protection is actually good for our economy. Since 1980, not going all the way back to 1970, if you look at the 6 major pollutants of air pollution that cause smog and acid rain and lead poisoning, all of those have decreased 54% since 1980. At the same amount of time, the gross domestic product has gone up 126%. So you had pollution down 50%, gross domestic product up 126%. This means at the same time we were doing all that pollution prevention and reduction, more cars were being built, more houses were being built, more power plants were being built, and so the economy was moving and had moved forward in very strong and robust ways. There was not a trade-off being made at that when you look at it at the high level. When you think about it carefully, when EPA announces a new rule or a new regulation or enforces it, it creates a need. And here's a demand factor of the environmental regulatory process. That need drives innovation. In almost all cases, environmental regulations that EPA has enacted have ended up being implemented cheaper and more efficiently than people thought when we were first thinking about doing it. And I know that there's often skepticism about this, but let's look at an example of the Engelhard Corporation in New Jersey, which led the commercial production of the catalytic converter. Today, catalytic converters are pretty ubiquitous. They're everywhere, as is unleaded gasoline. But that wasn't the case 30 years ago. EPA proposed under the Clean Air Act to remove lead from gasoline because in its own right, it was a major source of lead in our environment. Chambers of Commerce, business community, all were, I mean, this is a quote, entire industries might collapse. It's a poison. The Clean Air Act, I know no one has heard this recently, the Clean Air Act is a poison pill for the economy. I've never heard that before. But if you might recall, since the 1970s, the automobile industry has continued to function and continued to buy cars. In fact, there are almost 250 million cars on the road today in the United States. But lead pollution is down 92% from automobiles. Every child in America has less lead in their blood than they did 20 and 30 years ago. Not just children living in cities, but every child has had less. There's $17 billion of health benefits that are more than paying off the cost of implementing that rule. In fact, the economy, and how did I get back to Engelhard Corporation? Well, all the other pollutants from cars have been reduced, the numbers I mentioned earlier, because we were able to now put catalytic converters on cars when the lead wasn't in there. And so you've had all those other compounding benefits. And of course, to show you how it helped the economy when people are willing to innovate, the Engelhard Corporation was sold for $5 billion a couple of years ago. That was a company that they still exist, they still are making catalytic converters, and we still have them in the car.